Okay, so I got distracted by life and forgot to read for a few days, and so I've a little bit forgot where we left off. So I'm just going to start and remember as I go. All right, looks like he has just spoken to the man in the mirror. So, yes, I started. Okay. The mirror flickered out. For a moment, he just sat there staring, grateful not to be wearing constricting trews. Oh, woman in the mirror. Then he leapt to his feet, closing the connection and flinging the cloth safely over the mirror. He backed away and collapsed back onto his chair. A minute or two of controlled breathing and careful thoughts regarding ice floes in winter brought some measure of equilibrium. That had not been what he had been hoping for. Even so, he thought he had acquitted himself rather well. She had seemingly come away with a more positive opinion of him, which made him rather irritated with his past self. He had assumed, from the terror and deference he had encountered thus far, that the dread Lord Gavarax had been an effective dark wizard. What if he had not been as competent as Gav had thought? What if he had not been as competent as Gavarax had thought? His peers did not seem particularly impressed. Maybe he'd pulled the wool over the eyes of the naive, or maybe he hadn't. A toddler with a lightning wand would inspire fear and indulgence without respect. Uncomfortable thought, that. So much effort, from the stupid torches to the wasteful immolations, without even accomplishing the goal? He hadn't needed the embarrassment added to his ambivalence, but he really hadn't. Still, he had accidentally found a potential ally against Zarakonar, should it become necessary. He knew a tiny bit more about the plan. It spanned at least 2 countries, maybe more. How many dark wizards could a single country support, after all? His own country was rather small, he suddenly remembered in another irritating flash. It required demon seed as well as a princess. He'd need to surrender said princess, and he suspected that her participation would be somewhat irreversible. Most of the information increased his feelings of alarm, but any information had to be better than none, and any ally could be helpful. Not that he was sure talking to Valavina, Valavina, then, well, I don't know how I decided to say this last time, but we're going to go with Valvina. I don't know. Again, was wise. Oh, he wanted to. He very much wanted to. But she had toyed with him the entire conversation, he knew. He shuddered to think of what she must be like in person. That perfect face, that perfect body. It suddenly occurred to him that if he'd tried to build a certain aura from his looks and surroundings, she might have too. She knew exactly what effect she had. He couldn't have held a candle to her mastery or effect even before now. He needed to think about something else. Back to research. But reading the piles of notes on the desk was getting him nowhere. Surely there had to be some other way to figure out what he had been attempting to do before his memory vanished. Had it been independent research on some other project, or had it been tied to the princess in this master plan? Someone had swept up the broken glass and left pieces in a bucket, presumably in case they were still important. He didn't think they were important. Much of the glassware had been replaced, which made him wonder if somewhere in the castle was a closet full of spares for his inevitable hissy fits. If there had been clues in the mess, they were long gone. The runes on the floor had been smudged when he had woken up, and his frantic firefighting and searching had only worsened the effect. Now he studied them to try to reconstruct what had happened yesterday. Would he have tried to do this without notes? Surely some of the papers would match something that was left on the floor. He started sifting. Anything he could immediately recognize as unrelated went in one pile. Spells for inflicting disfiguring plagues, unrelenting pain, immolation, receding hairlines, and the like, none of which required a protective circle. Anything that looked potentially related went in another, and the plainly baffling went in a third. The handwriting did not always match. Clearly some of the spells had come from other sources. Some had notes on the provenance. A few, he suspected, might be very valuable indeed. He did notice a pattern after a bit, not in the papers, but in his memory. Things that stood alone as facts, names of objects, complete procedures, shook loose relatively easily, the spells springing to mind as soon as he recalled their existence. Things that required context, not so much. He couldn't remember what he had been working on, or how the more theoretical magic hung together. Notes in his own handwriting, which he only recognized by writing something now and comparing it, meant nothing to him. For that matter, he couldn't remember the history of his own country, or details about local politics, or where in the world his fellow dark wizards might be located. He hadn't simply slipped and fallen. He was certain. Head injuries could never result in such precise memory removal, could they? There, one of the pages had a series of diagrams that bore at least a passing resemblance to the smudge near his foot. Why hadn't he been more careful when he woke up? Because he hadn't realized the smudges belonged to him. How much more of his own work would he destroy bumbling around? Hang on. I might not be reading very long today. Just because, yeah, it's only been 6 minutes, but my throat is kind of done. I'm trying to get the... There's a break, but it's in a while, and I don't think I want to read that long today, so... I guess I'll keep going a ways longer. The next 2 pages appeared to be related, then a few that looked like part of a spell for making walls drip ichor, which looked like it had been abandoned. What a relief. And there was another one of the symbols from the floor. The symbols didn't mean anything to him now, but from the careful descriptions of the ratios of the arms and the precise order in which to draw the strokes, he suspected they may not have meant anything to him before he had lost his memory either. The idea of drawing out spell components by rote felt horrifying, but apparently his previous self had disagreed. He missed the confidence of his real self clearly felt, even if he couldn't remember what it felt like. He laid out the sheets in order as best he could tell from the remains on the floor. There were 2 symbols that had no match. He looked at the pile of papers he'd used to beat back the flames. His heart sank. The bottom sheets from the pile crumbled away at his touch, leaving ashy smears on his hands. Above that, the paper had fared a little better. He found one more of the missing symbols in the top half of a sheet. The bottom, on the other hand, had blackened, its edges trailing away into pale gray wisps, which suggested the missing symbol had graced one of the cinders below. He hissed in frustration. Well, he would have to make the best of it. He started reading the notes in the margins in earnest. When he had finished, he sat back, feeling chilled. A knowledge demon. Estograph. He had been calling upon a knowledge demon. But why? What could have been important enough to try to contact that dangerous entity? The paper said nothing about danger. They were dry and to the point of terseness in another crabbed hand, but every hair on his arms lifted to the end of it, and animal instincts grabbled at the back of his skull, trying to escape when he even thought about it. He couldn't remember anything about them except that they terrified him. Whether that terror had been present before the ritual or came as a result, he couldn't tell. Maybe he'd needed to know something about this spell Zara Konar was putting together. He certainly did not trust the other wizard. But maybe he'd wanted something entirely unrelated. Perhaps he'd simply been done in by his own idle curiosity. Worst of all, he might never know. He hurled a crystal at the wall and it shattered into a spray of glass shards. He froze, waiting for someone's wrath, and then realized the only wrath would come from him. He slowly released the breath that he had been holding, even more frustrated by his own stupidity, and by the knowledge that he would have to pick up even more pieces of broken glass. It did explain how only select knowledge had been removed so precisely while the rest had been left. Had the result been an accident or the goal, he would have cheerfully murdered someone for less cryptic notes. Well, not cheerfully. Actually, he wasn't sure how he'd feel about killing someone. He supposed his real self would be disgusted by his skittishness. He'd need to get over that if he wanted to defend himself. He could call the knowledge demon again. The notes were all there. The last rune hadn't been too badly scuffed, unlike some of the others. He could see pretty clearly how it had been originally drawn, and he could probably fix it. If anyone knew what had happened, it would be the spirit of memory. He felt a chill run up his spine and ruthlessly clamped down on it. He couldn't stay a mewling innocent forever, not if he wanted his memories back. Hellfires, not if he wanted to survive, which was one of the few things he was certain of. He would have to do some of the things that scared him eventually. Just not right now. Was that fear or wisdom? He couldn't tell. But he had dived into firefighting without thought to the consequences, and look where that had left him. He would consider. He'd see if he could think of other options. Because right now he really, really did not want to repair that circle. And there's the break. All right. Talk to you later.